This video contains major spoilers for Persona 3 Reload. So I was playing Persona 3 Reload and I was thinking, man, this seems a lot easier than P3P. I had initially chalked it up to me being more experienced in the series. After all, I was still relatively new when I played Portable, and now I probably have over 500 hours in the series. I went back and looked at the stats at some of the boss fights and realized that Reload actually had buffed the bosses. And that's when I realized that while Atlus had buffed the enemies, they buffed the player even more. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk. Even though I'm much better at Persona games than past me, what really made the difference was the sheer amount of options given to the player in Reload that past versions didn't have. Let's take a look at the biggest change, Theurgy. It's this new super move that every character gains access to. Each character has a different way to charge their meter, and it's related to how that character plays. For example, Yukari is a healer, so she gains meter faster while healing other party members. And these super moves are strong. Like, really, really strong. They also bypass resistances, but is balanced out by... Wait, how exactly is it balanced out? It wasn't in past versions, so does Atlus just buff enemies' health? Well, yes, but no. This is sometimes the case, but it doesn't really even out. The enemies aren't really given tools to deal with Theurgy, so they just kinda get steamrolled. Yeah, your teammates can't use it if they're statist, but generally speaking, you can curb stomp a lot of bosses with the correct timing. And they stack with bonuses like Charge and Concentrate, which more than double the damage of your next attack. That is, up until a certain boss. If you played Reload, you know what I'm talking about. The final Takaya fight. Takaya is the only enemy in the game who can use a Theurgy against you. And it's so unbelievably memorable. It's an awesome scene when he finally swallows his pride in an attempt to defeat you. You also have Jin and Takaya shifting on the bridge, but outside of that, there aren't really any examples of the enemies being able to take advantage of these new mechanics. This, unfortunately, is a double-edged sword. It makes the game inherently easier, but if they did give enemies a weapon like Shift or Theurgy, it would make those cool story moments way less impactful. So that begs the question, how do we give the player a plethora of options while also not letting them just breeze through the game? How can we give enemies tools that can counteract new mechanics or even abuse them? Well, let's take a look at a game that simultaneously does an amazing and horrible job at this. Monster Hunter Rise. Rise made a few tweaks to the core Monster Hunter gameplay. The first is the wire bugs. They're these little beetle-looking things that you can use to zip around, but they're on a cooldown. You can also use one to wirefall, which is a way to immediately get back up after you've been hit. Wirebugs are also a resource for your Silkbind attacks. They're kind of an all-in-one payment system for all of the new features. So you've got greatly increased movement, especially vertical movement, and access to many more attacks, most of which are pretty strong. So the team over at Capcom came up with a few tools so that monsters could keep up. For starters, monsters have a lot of hitboxes that extend far more vertically than they really should. The hitboxes in this series can sometimes be hit or miss, but these extensions are really ludicrous and not appropriate. It feels incredibly frustrating to get hit by an attack that's 20 feet below you, and anyone who's played Rise can attest to getting carded because of this. This is definitely the worst example of balancing options. On the other hand, my favorite is the use of follow-up attacks and combos. See, a lot of monsters won't just stop with one attack. Occasionally they'll follow it up with another. This is nothing new, but it heavily punishes greedy wirefalls. Ironically, the devs didn't really change anything in the game to compensate for this ability. It's something that was already in, and the new options fit so well into the pre-existing system that it works smoothly. I'm a huge fan of this. It keeps you accountable for not abusing this new, potentially overpowered tool. And considering a lot of new fights are more like bullet hells, this is a good difficulty bump. However, my favorite are the new inescapable combos. If you fought Kushala, you know what I'm talking about. Normally, you can't take damage after you've been knocked down. It's a way to prevent the player from getting locked into a corner, and you can strategically time your get up to avoid damage. However, sometimes a monster will hit you with a weak move that doesn't actually knock you down, and then follow it up with a stronger move that will most certainly cart you. The only way to escape is to wirefall out of it, but if you've been greedy with your Silkbinds and other abilities, you're basically a goner. This is a fantastic way to keep you on your toes. They don't happen frequently enough to where you're forever hoarding wirebugs. You're also able to carry up to 3 wirebugs. Some Silkbind attacks only cost 1, and wirefall only cost 1, so you're still able to use your wirebugs offensively. It's a fantastic system that forces you to think critically about what resources you have available to you, as well as how far into the fight you are. If you're looking to add mechanics to a game, this is the formula you should use to balance them out. You need to give the enemies options to directly counter what you've given the player, but it needs to be done in a fair way. Giving enemies obscene hitboxes or gimmicky mechanics can come off as extremely frustrating if executed poorly. Of course, this is all assuming that your goal is to give the player options while keeping the difficulty in check. If you're just looking for some kind of power fantasy game, go crazy, but generally speaking, it's tricky. There's lots of room for error, and even renowned developers like Nintendo aren't strangers to botching this. Breath of the Wild added a master mode, which is just bougie hard mode that has enemies regenerate health. Unfortunately, the game, but more specifically combat, was not designed for this in mind. Sometimes you're just not given the openings you need, so you just have to watch all of your hard work be reversed. There needs to always be continuity and synergy between what you and the enemies are given. I'm no game dev, I know development is tricky and a lot more work than just typing a few lines of code. But this issue really needs to be more important. Changing the difficulty of a game shouldn't just be a matter of giving them bigger numbers. It needs to be a precise, delicate process that should be fine-tuned. If you correctly do so, you end up with a game that challenges the player at every corner. It can make even mundane tasks incredibly engaging. If you don't, you end up with the Jackal snipers from Halo 2. Anyway, options are a great tool to have. They make every gameplay loop feel more varied and refreshing. But if the enemies don't have the tools necessary to deal with those options, then it doesn't matter how amazing the game is, everything will just become routine. Thanks for watching.